Arif woke up before the first light of the day had even touched the sky. The small room he shared with his younger sister smelled of old wood and damp clothes. He rubbed his eyes and quietly stepped out of the thin blanket, careful not to wake her. Today, like every other day, he would wake up early to help his family before school. His mother was already awake, quietly preparing breakfast with whatever little food they had. The sound of water boiling on the stove and the faint smell of bread made the small house feel alive, even in the morning silence. Arif quickly put on his worn-out clothes. The shirt had small holes near the collar, and the trousers were patched in a few places. He didn't mind. It was what he had, and he had grown used to it. His shoes had long lost their original color and had cracks that his bare toes peeked through. He glanced at his reflection in the mirror, a small chipped piece of glass hanging on the wall, and tried to straighten his hair, though it had a mind of its own. After helping his mother for a few minutes, he grabbed his old school bag. It was heavy, not because it carried books or pencils, but because it carried the weight of his daily struggle. The bag had tears along the seams, and the zipper had been fixed with string more than once. Inside, Arif carefully placed his few notebooks, a small pencil, and a thin lunch he had managed to prepare, a piece of flatbread wrapped in a clean cloth. Tucked carefully in the side pocket was a small secret, something he carried everywhere but never showed anyone. Walking to school was never easy. The path was dusty, uneven, and sometimes muddy if it had rained. Arif walked quickly, not because he was in a hurry, but because the streets could be unsafe at times and he wanted to reach school before the teacher arrived. Along the way, he passed by other children who had new shoes, fresh uniforms, and shining backpacks. They ran, laughed, and joked with friends while Arif kept his head down and moved quietly. He didn't feel jealous. He had learned early on that comparing his life to others only made the day longer. School was a few blocks away, a small building with peeling paint and broken windows. Inside, the classrooms were crowded, and the benches were old. Arif found his usual seat at the back next to the window, where the sunlight sometimes fell on the desk in the morning. He placed his bag carefully beside him and opened his notebook to start the day's work. The teacher walked in, greeting the class with a warm smile. And Arif tried to focus, but his mind often wandered to what awaited him at home, the small tasks he had to complete, and the tiny responsibilities he carried. His classmates noticed him, as they always did. Some looked at him with curiosity, some with indifference, and a few whispered jokes that he pretended not to hear. Arif had grown used to it. The teasing didn't bother him anymore. He was quiet, focused, and always ready to help when asked, but he rarely spoke unless spoken to. Despite his quietness, there was something about him that drew attention. Maybe it was the way he listened so carefully, the way he helped clean the blackboard without being asked, or perhaps it was the faint glimmer of determination in his eyes. Arif's bag, old and battered, held more than just school supplies. There were small folded papers tucked carefully in the corners, handmade by him with a lot of care. They were simple drawings, small letters, and little notes meant for someone he loved deeply. Only he knew about them, and he carried them everywhere, protecting them as if they were treasures. These papers were not for showing off, not for earning praise, but for spreading a little happiness in a world that often seemed harsh and unfair. The morning lessons began. The teacher wrote on the board, explained carefully, and asked questions to the students. Arif tried his best to follow along, copying down notes and paying attention. Sometimes he made small mistakes, and the teacher corrected him gently. He liked learning, even though he did not have all the resources others had. A single pencil or a torn notebook never stopped him. He learned to make the best of what he had, turning scarcity into resilience. At break time, while the other children ran outside to play or to buy snacks, Arif sat quietly at his desk, opening one of his little papers. On it was a drawing he had made for his younger sister, with bright colors and a happy sun in the corner. He smiled softly, thinking of her. She had been sick last week, and he had stayed up late helping her, making sure she had water and medicine. The drawing was a small way to cheer her up, a simple act of love in a world that often forgot the little joys. He felt the gaze of a few classmates on him. They whispered among themselves, noticing the papers he was carefully handling. Arif's heart raced slightly. He didn't want anyone to see these, but he also didn't want to hide his feelings. He folded the paper back carefully and placed it in the side pocket of his bag. Little did he know that fate had a different plan for the day. The second half of the morning passed. Lessons were read, sums were solved, and questions were answered. The classroom was filled with the sounds of scribbling pencils, murmurs, and occasional laughter. Arif tried to focus, but his bag, hanging slightly off the desk, shifted a little every time he moved. He adjusted it silently, not wanting to disturb anyone. Then it happened. A small movement, a slight nudge, and the bag tipped over. Not loudly, just a soft thud, but enough to make the items inside tumble onto the floor. The torn notebooks, the small pencil, the piece of flatbread all spilled out. And among them, the carefully folded papers, bright with colors and messages, scattered in a small chaotic pile. The classroom went silent. Every eye turned to the floor, and for a moment Arif froze, heart pounding. He bent down quickly to pick everything up, but his fingers trembled. The papers fluttered as he tried to gather them, and some landed on the laps of nearby students. Whispers started soft at first, then louder. The students were curious, peeking at the little drawings and notes. Some tilted their heads, puzzled, others frowned, not understanding. A few of the more empathetic classmates leaned in, trying to see what had happened without making Arif feel worse. Arif's face burned with embarrassment. He expected laughter, teasing, maybe even ridicule. His worst fear had come true, or so he thought. He knelt down, trying to collect the scattered papers, murmuring apologies. His hands shook, but he was careful not to crease the fragile creations. Every paper held a story, a piece of his heart, and he could not let them be ruined. The teacher noticed the commotion and walked over. She knelt beside Arif, her eyes scanning the scattered papers. Her expression changed from curiosity to surprise and then to gentle understanding. She looked at him, not with judgment but with warmth. Arif looked up, unsure of what she thought. The classroom held its breath, waiting for the reaction that would follow. Arif felt a small sense of relief when the teacher picked up one of the papers. It was a simple drawing, with a sun in the corner and a message written in a child's careful handwriting. She smiled softly, turning to glance at the class. "These are very special," she said quietly. "They are not just drawings. They are messages of love and hope." The words hung in the air. The students looked at each other, slowly realizing that these papers were not ordinary. They were creations of care, small gestures meant to brighten someone else's day. The classroom, once filled with whispers and curiosity, became quiet again, but this time the silence was thoughtful. Arif, still kneeling, felt a strange mix of embarrassment and pride. His secret was out, but it was met with understanding, not mockery. As he carefully gathered the papers, the teacher helped him. She placed the drawings and letters neatly back into his bag and gave him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Arif looked around, noticing the curious faces of his classmates, some of them smiling softly, others still trying to process what they had seen. For the first time, he felt a small connection with them, a tiny bridge forming over the differences that had always separated him from the others. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Lessons continued, but there was a different energy in the classroom. Students whispered less, smiled more, and looked at Arif differently. He returned to his seat, careful with his bag, but he carried a new feeling inside, a mix of hope, relief, and the quiet joy of being understood. For the first time, the burden of secrecy felt a little lighter, and the weight of his daily struggle seemed slightly less daunting. When the final bell rang, Arif gathered his belongings slowly. He didn't rush out like the others, savoring the small change in how he felt. Walking home, he held his bag close, thinking of his sister and the drawings he had made for her. He knew she would smile when she saw them, and that thought warmed him more than the sun ever could. The journey back was the same dusty, uneven path, but Arif walked with a small sense of pride. He had faced another day, carried his struggles silently, and yet shared a piece of his heart with the world. And though he did not know it yet, the events of today would ripple far beyond the classroom, touching hearts in ways he could not imagine. Today, a poor boy's small act of love had begun to change how others saw him, and perhaps how they would see the world. The next day, Arif woke up with the first faint light of morning streaming through the cracked window. The small room smelled of fresh air mixed with the faint aroma of breakfast being prepared. He quietly dressed in his patched clothes, careful not to wake his little sister, who was still asleep. The events of yesterday lingered in his mind, the moment his bag fell and his secret was revealed. He wondered how today would be, if anything had changed, or if he would still feel the same weight of curiosity and judgment from his classmates. At breakfast, his mother noticed the small smile on his face, something rare in these mornings filled with struggles. She asked quietly if he had eaten enough yesterday at school, if he had shared his lunch. Arif nodded, eating the simple flatbread and drinking water, his mind partially at school, partially at home. He made sure to pack his bag carefully today, double-checking the contents, especially the small papers that had brought so much attention. He folded them neatly and placed them in the side pocket, tucking them close to his heart. The journey to school was quiet, the streets still filled with early morning noises of vendors preparing for the day. Arif noticed the other children running and laughing, their shoes bright, their uniforms crisp. Some of them had seen what had fallen from his bag, and he felt their curious gazes as he passed by. He walked faster, trying to ignore it, but the thought of yesterday stayed with him. He wondered if they now saw him differently, if their whispers would turn into something kind, or if ridicule would return. Inside the classroom, the air felt different. There was a sense of anticipation among the students, subtle yet present. Arif found his usual seat, placing his bag carefully on the side. He glanced around, noticing classmates stealing brief looks at him, some with soft smiles, others with unsure expressions. The teacher arrived and greeted everyone warmly. Her eyes finding Arif for a moment, giving him a small nod of encouragement. That simple gesture made him feel slightly braver. The morning lessons began. Arif tried to focus, writing in his notebook and following the teacher's instructions. Occasionally, he would glance at his bag, making sure the papers inside were safe. Every so often, one of the classmates would glance at him, their curiosity mixed with something else. Perhaps admiration, perhaps understanding. He didn't speak much, but he felt their awareness. It was strange to be noticed, not for what he lacked, but for what he held in his heart. During break, the classroom emptied quickly as children ran outside to play, buy snacks, or chat with friends. Arif stayed behind, quietly opening one of the folded papers. This time it was a note for his sister, a small drawing of their home, with a bright sun above it and little figures holding hands. He smiled softly, thinking of her and how it would cheer her up. He wished he could give her more, but he had learned to make happiness with the smallest things, the simplest gestures. His fingers traced the lines of the drawing, careful not to smudge the colors. Suddenly, a soft voice spoke behind him. One of his classmates, a girl who had watched him closely yesterday, asked quietly, "Did you make these?" Arif nodded hesitantly, unsure of how to respond. She smiled gently. "They are really nice. Your sister must be very lucky." He felt a strange warmth in his chest. For the first time, he felt that someone saw him not for his worn clothes or torn shoes, but for the care he put into something meaningful. Other classmates began to gather, slowly, peeking at the papers from a distance, whispering among themselves. Instead of laughter or ridicule, there were words of curiosity and admiration. Some asked questions about the drawings, how he made them, and why he carried them. Arif answered softly, explaining that he wanted to make his sister happy and sometimes make little gifts for others who needed them. The room was quiet, attentive, and for the first time he felt accepted. The teacher noticed the small gathering and came over, kneeling beside him. She read one of the papers, her eyes softening as she took in the simple, heartfelt message. She looked at the class, her voice calm and gentle, explaining the meaning behind Arif's drawings. She spoke about kindness, generosity, and the strength of love even in difficult times. The students listened, some with wide eyes, some nodding, slowly understanding something deeper than words could explain. Arif felt a mix of emotions, embarrassment for being noticed, pride for being understood, and relief that his small acts of love were appreciated. His hands trembled slightly as he carefully folded the papers and placed them back in his bag. The teacher smiled at him, her gesture encouraging and protective, as if letting him know that his heart was valued. The rest of the day passed with a different rhythm. Lessons continued, but there was a new energy in the classroom. Students spoke to Arif with more kindness, offered to help him with tasks, and treated him differently. He noticed small gestures, someone sharing a pencil, another offering a piece of snack. These actions, small as they were, felt monumental to Arif, a sign that the world could be gentle, even in places where hardship was common. At lunchtime, Arif sat quietly at his desk eating the flatbread he had packed. One of the classmates, a boy who had watched him curiously yesterday, came over and offered a piece of his own food. Arif hesitated for a moment, then accepted it with a soft smile. They shared a few words, simple and hesitant, but meaningful. It was a small bridge being built, a connection formed in the midst of ordinary life. The afternoon lessons were easier for Arif. His mind was lighter, his heart warmer. He participated more, answering questions and sharing his thoughts. The teacher noticed and praised him gently, encouraging him to continue. The feeling of being seen for who he was rather than what he lacked gave him strength and confidence. He realized that kindness and understanding could change even the hardest of days. When the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Arif packed his bag carefully. He held the papers close, thinking of his sister and how happy she would be when he returned home. The journey back was the same, dusty path filled with small shops and morning chatter. But it felt different to him. He noticed the small smiles, from classmates still lingering as he passed by, some nodding in acknowledgement, others waving softly. At home, his sister ran to him eagerly as he entered the small house. He smiled and handed her the folded papers, explaining each drawing and message. Her eyes lit up, her laughter filling the room. Arif's heart swelled with quiet joy. In that moment, all the hardship, all the struggles seemed lighter. He had made someone he loved happy, and that mattered more than anything. His mother watched them with a soft smile, pride and relief mingling in her gaze. She didn't need to speak. Her eyes said enough. Arif felt a sense of belonging, a warmth he carried with him long after the laughter faded. He realized that even in the smallest acts and the quietest gestures, one could create ripples of happiness and connection. That night, Arif lay in bed, thinking about the day. He thought about the classroom, the classmates who had begun to understand, him and the teacher who had recognized his heart. He thought about his sister, her laughter and the simple joy they shared. For the first time in a long while, he felt hope, not just for himself, but for the small world around him. He closed his eyes, imagining the bright sun, the small figures, holding hands in his drawing and the warmth of the day's kindness. Even though tomorrow would bring the same challenges, the same worn clothes, and the same patched shoes, he felt ready to face the world, to continue carrying his bag, his drawings, and his small acts of love. For Arif had learned that even a poor boy with a tattered bag could touch hearts, change perspectives, and make the world a little brighter, one small paper at a time. The following morning, Arif woke up to the soft light of dawn, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. The events of the previous 2 days lingered in his mind like a gentle whisper. His bag, which had caused so much curiosity and surprise, now felt lighter somehow, as if it carried not only his few belongings but also a newfound sense of hope. He got dressed carefully, making sure his patched clothes were neat, and tucked the folded papers securely in the side pocket of his bag. Each paper was a piece of his heart, and he wanted to protect them as he always had. At breakfast, his mother gave him a quiet nod, noticing the subtle changes in his expression. There was a spark of pride in her eyes, something that made Arif feel braver as he ate the simple meal. He thought of his little sister, who was still asleep, dreaming quietly in the room next door. He wanted to give her something more today, another small joy to brighten her morning. That thought made him hold the bag a little closer, as if it were a treasure chest rather than a carrier of school supplies. On the way to school, the streets were filled with the sounds of morning activity. Vendors arranged fruits and vegetables. On their carts, the smell of fresh bread filled the air, and children ran by, laughing and chatting. Arif noticed familiar faces from yesterday, some smiling, others giving small nods. He felt a strange comfort in those gestures, a sense that the world around him was noticing the goodness he carried quietly in his heart. Inside the classroom, he found his usual seat by the window. His bag rested beside him, carefully placed so that nothing would fall. The teacher arrived, greeted the class warmly, and began the morning lesson. Arif tried to focus on the words being spoken, the equations on the board, and the stories being read. But his thoughts often drifted to the small papers in his bag, the little messages and drawings that held so much meaning. He wondered what would happen if someone looked at them again, and for a moment, a flutter of anxiety crossed his chest. During a quiet moment in class, a classmate leaned over and whispered, "Can we see them again?" Arif hesitated, unsure if he should share. He had been careful to keep them private, meant only for his sister and a few others who truly needed them. But the gentle curiosity in the classmate's eyes made him nod slightly. Slowly, he pulled out one of the papers, a colorful drawing of a sun rising over hills with a message written in careful handwriting. He handed it over, watching nervously as the classmate's eyes widened in surprise and appreciation. The teacher noticed the small exchange and came closer. Kneeling beside Arif, she read the paper carefully, her expression softening. "These are very special," she said quietly, her voice filled with warmth. She turned to the class and spoke about the value of kindness, the strength of small gestures, and the way even children can spread love and hope through simple acts. The students listened, some whispering to each other, some nodding slowly, and a few glancing at Arif with new understanding. Arif felt a mixture of relief and pride. His heart had always been full of love, even when his pockets were empty and his clothes worn. Now it seemed that others could see it too. His classmates began to gather quietly around him, curious but respectful. They asked questions about the drawings, the messages, and the stories behind them. Arif answered softly, explaining that he wanted to make his sister happy and sometimes bring a little cheer to others who needed it. His words were simple, but the sincerity in them was undeniable. The classroom buzzed with a different energy. Children who had once ignored him now showed interest and care. One offered a pencil when he noticed Arif's was broken. Another shared a small snack, smiling shyly. The teacher watched with quiet satisfaction, seeing how a single act of courage and kindness could ripple outward, touching hearts in ways no one had expected. Arif's small world, once so private and hidden, began to expand with connection and warmth. During lunch, Arif sat quietly at his desk, eating the flatbread he had brought. One by one, classmates approached, offering small gestures of friendship. A boy handed him a fresh apple, saying simply, "For you." A girl offered a piece of her snack, her eyes shining with kindness. Arif felt his chest swell with quiet gratitude. These gestures, though small, carried immense meaning, showing him that even in a world where he had little, there were people who cared. The afternoon lessons passed with a new rhythm. Arif participated more than usual, answering questions and sharing thoughts. The teacher praised him gently, encouraging him to continue, and he felt a surge of confidence. For the first time, he realized that being poor did not mean being invisible. His actions, his heart, and his kindness were seen, valued, and respected. The feeling was strange, almost magical, and it filled him with hope. When the final bell rang, Arif packed his bag carefully, making sure every paper was secure. The walk home felt lighter than before. The path, once dusty and uneven, now seemed welcoming, filled with the sounds of laughter and small greetings from familiar faces. Arif noticed a few classmates waving, smiling, acknowledging him in a way that made him feel included. He held the bag close, thinking of the little joy he would bring to his sister today. At home, his sister ran to greet him as he entered the small house. He smiled and handed her the folded papers, explaining each drawing and message. Her eyes lit up, her laughter filling the room with warmth. Arif felt a quiet sense of triumph and happiness. In that moment, the hardships of the day seemed lighter. The small acts of love he had carried so carefully had reached their destination, creating joy and connection where there was once only struggle. His mother watched quietly, pride shining in her eyes. She didn't need to speak. Her gaze conveyed everything. Arif felt a deep sense of belonging, a warmth that settled in his chest. He realized that the smallest acts of kindness could have the largest impact, and that even a poor boy with a tattered bag could touch hearts and change perspectives. That evening, Arif sat by the window looking at the fading light. He thought about the classroom, the teacher, and his classmates. He thought about the small gestures that had made the day feel so different. He thought about his sister and the laughter that had filled their home. In the quiet of the night, he made a silent promise to continue spreading small acts of love and hope. to never let his circumstances define the goodness in his heart. As he lay down to sleep, the soft sounds of the evening around him, Arif felt a sense of peace. The journey was far from over, and challenges would still come, but he had learned something precious. That kindness, even from a child with little, could create ripples of change. And in that quiet, simple understanding, Arif drifted off to sleep, ready to face tomorrow with courage, heart, and the unshakable belief that even the smallest actions could make a big difference. The next morning, Arif woke up with the sound of birds chirping outside his window. The soft light filtered through the cracks in the wall, painting faint patterns on the floor. Today felt different, heavier, with a strange kind of expectation. He got dressed quietly, slipping into his patched clothes, and checked his bag once more. Each folded paper inside felt like a tiny treasure, holding stories and love meant for his sister and for anyone else who might need a little light in a dark day. Breakfast was simple, as always. His mother placed the small meal on the table and smiled gently at him. She noticed something had changed in her son, the way he held his head a little higher, the way his eyes sparkled with a new sense of courage. Arif smiled back, trying not to let his excitement spill over, though it bubbled quietly inside him. Today he felt might be a day of more discovery, more understanding, not just for him but for everyone around him. On the walk to school, the streets seemed alive with new energy. Children ran past, some waving, some glancing at him with smiles that hadn't been there before. Vendors shouted their daily greetings, the smell of fresh bread and spices filling the air. Arif felt the familiar weight of his bag on his back, but today it felt lighter, almost as if the love inside was lifting it. He walked with a quiet confidence, a small spring in his step, feeling the gentle warmth of recognition from those around him. Inside the classroom, Arif carefully placed his bag beside his desk. The teacher arrived, greeting everyone warmly. Her eyes lingered on Arif for a moment, and he felt the same reassuring nod as yesterday. The room felt different today. Students seemed more attentive, quieter. Their curiosity about Arif now mingled with respect. There was a shift, subtle but real, and Arif noticed it, letting a small smile form on his lips. Lessons began as usual, but the energy in the room was different. When the teacher asked questions, more students volunteered to answer, and there was an unspoken awareness that kindness mattered just as much as knowledge. Arif answered carefully, his mind focused, but he kept thinking about the papers in his bag, the little messages that had already begun to change how his classmates saw him. He realized that even simple gestures of love could ripple outward, touching hearts and shaping perspectives. During the mid-morning break, students spilled out into the playground. Arif stayed behind, carefully removing a drawing he had made last night for his sister. It showed a small garden, flowers in bloom, and two children holding hands, smiling. He had drawn it with care, thinking of the laughter it would bring. As he unfolded the paper, he noticed a group of classmates gathering nearby, their expressions filled with curiosity and gentle anticipation. One of the classmates stepped forward, a boy who had once been quiet and distant, and said, "Can you tell us about these?" Arif hesitated, but then nodded, his voice soft but steady. He explained the meaning behind the drawings, the little stories, and the notes he had written. The teacher came over, kneeling beside him, listening carefully. She added gentle encouragement, highlighting the value of empathy, kindness, and sharing love in even the smallest forms. The students were captivated. Some leaned in closer, wanting to see the drawings better. Others asked questions, their voices tinged with admiration. Arif felt a warm glow in his chest. He had expected judgment, perhaps laughter or ridicule, but instead there was interest, care, and respect. He realized that even the quietest acts could create understanding, and that the heart's generosity was often more powerful than the loudest words. One by one, classmates began small gestures of kindness. A girl handed him a pencil to replace the broken one he always carried. A boy offered half of his snack, saying quietly, "I think your sister will like this too." Arif felt gratitude swell inside him. These were not grand gestures, but they meant the world. They were proof that understanding, even in small ways, could transform a space, a day, a life. The teacher noticed the change in the classroom's atmosphere and decided to share a story with the students. She spoke about the power of small acts, how one kind action could inspire others, and how empathy could create a ripple effect far beyond what anyone imagined. She encouraged students to look for opportunities to spread kindness in their own ways. The room was quiet, attentive, and filled with a sense of shared purpose. Arif felt a quiet pride, realizing that his small papers had sparked something bigger than he had imagined. Lunchtime arrived and Arif sat quietly, opening the flatbread he had packed. A few classmates came over, offering snacks and simple words of friendship. Arif accepted them with gentle smiles, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. The quiet bonds of understanding were forming, little by little, around him. He felt included, not just for what he could give in return, but for who he was. The afternoon lessons continued, and Arif participated with a new sense of confidence. He answered questions, shared ideas, and even helped a classmate who was struggling. The teacher noticed his efforts, praising him for his thoughtfulness and understanding. Arif felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. He realized that knowledge and kindness were intertwined, and that even in the smallest classroom, one could create change. When the school day ended, Arif packed his bag carefully, making sure every paper was secure. On the way home, he noticed small gestures from classmates, a wave, a smile, a nod. It was a silent acknowledgement of his presence and his heart. Each small gesture made him feel seen, respected, and valued. The path home, dusty and uneven as always, now felt filled with possibility and warmth. At home, his sister ran to greet him eagerly. He smiled, handing her the folded papers and explaining each drawing. Her laughter filled the small house, bringing warmth to the simple walls. Arif's heart swelled with quiet pride. In that moment, the hardships of the day seemed to melt away, replaced with the joy of connection and love. His mother watched from the doorway, her eyes soft with pride and understanding. She did not need to speak. Her gaze conveyed all the encouragement and recognition he needed. Arif felt a sense of belonging and purpose that he had never felt before. The small acts of love he carried in his bag had begun to ripple outward, changing not just his own life, but the hearts of those around him. That night, as Arif lay in bed, he thought about the day. He reflected on the kindness he had received, the small gestures of friendship, and the teacher's words about empathy. He thought about his sister's laughter and the warmth of their home. In the quiet of the night, he understood something powerful, that even the smallest acts of love could grow, spreading far beyond what one could imagine. He made a silent promise to continue creating, giving, and sharing, knowing that his heart could make a difference in the world around him. The morning air was crisp as Arif woke up, the faint light of dawn spilling into the small room he shared with his sister. Today felt different, heavier with a sense of anticipation. He dressed quietly in his patched clothes, tucked the folded papers carefully into his bag, and went to the small kitchen where his mother had already placed a modest breakfast. She gave him a gentle smile, noticing the quiet determination in his eyes. Arif returned the smile, feeling the warmth of home and the small courage that had been growing inside him these past days. As he walked to school, the street seemed alive with possibility. Children ran past him, laughing and playing, some pausing to wave. Vendors called out their greetings, and the smells of fresh bread and spices filled the air. Arif felt a quiet pride as he carried his bag close, knowing that inside it were pieces of his heart, little messages and drawings that had begun to change the way people saw him. The thought made him feel lighter, as if the love he carried inside was lifting the burden of the day. Inside the classroom, he placed his bag carefully beside his desk. His classmates looked at him with curiosity, their expressions soft and respectful. The teacher arrived and greeted the class warmly, her eyes lingering on Arif for a moment, offering a nod of encouragement. The room felt alive with possibility. There was an unspoken understanding among the students now, a shared awareness that kindness mattered, and that even the smallest acts could make a difference. Lessons began, but Arif's mind kept drifting to the papers in his bag. He had drawn a special one last night, a picture of his sister smiling under a tree with sunlight pouring down, holding a message that said, "Happiness grows with love." He wanted to share it, but first he needed to finish his classwork. He worked diligently, answering questions and helping a few classmates who struggled with their lessons. The teacher noticed and praised him quietly, her encouragement filling him with confidence. When break arrived, Arif carefully removed the drawing from his bag. This time he shared it openly with the class, One by one, his classmates leaned in, their eyes wide with wonder. The teacher came over and read the note aloud, emphasizing the love and hope it carried. There was a hush in the room, an acknowledgement of something rare and beautiful. Arif felt a swell of pride but also humility. He hadn't expected so much attention, but he hoped that what he was sharing could bring happiness to others. One of his classmates, a boy who had been quiet before, stepped forward and said, "I never thought something so small could be so special." Others nodded, offering quiet approval, and some even whispered about ways they could create their own small acts of kindness. The teacher smiled, seeing the ripple effect Arif's simple drawings were creating. The classroom had transformed. Curiosity had turned into understanding and understanding into action. During lunchtime, classmates came over to sit with him, sharing food and words of friendship. Arif accepted their gestures with gentle smiles, feeling the warmth of inclusion for the first time in a long while. One girl handed him a notebook she had decorated herself, saying quietly, "I wanted to make something for you too." Arif's heart raced with gratitude. These small acts of giving, the quiet connections, made him realize that even in difficult circumstances, love and kindness could flourish. The afternoon lessons passed with a different rhythm. Arif participated more confidently, offering answers and helping others with their work. The teacher praised his efforts, and his classmates began to see him not as a poor boy with little, but as someone with a generous heart and a quiet strength. Every small interaction seemed to build bridges, connecting people through empathy and understanding. As the school day drew to a close, Arif packed his bag carefully, making sure every paper and drawing was secure. On the walk home, he noticed small gestures of acknowledgement from classmates, a wave, a nod, a shy smile. The dusty path seemed brighter, filled with possibilities and hope. Each small recognition reminded him that even the simplest acts could change how people saw each other, that the heart's generosity could be stronger than any material wealth. At home, his sister ran to greet him eagerly. He smiled and handed her the folded papers, explaining each drawing. Her laughter filled the small house, a sound that warmed every corner. Arif felt a quiet triumph. In that moment, the hardships of life seemed lighter, replaced by the joy of sharing love and happiness. His mother watched from the doorway, her eyes soft with pride, her heart full of quiet relief. Arif felt a sense of belonging and purpose he had never experienced before. That evening after dinner, Arif sat by the window, looking at the fading light. He thought about the classroom, the teacher, the classmates, and the small acts of kindness that had grown from his own. He thought about the laughter of his sister, the warmth of his mother's gaze, and the gentle acknowledgement from those around him. In the quiet of the night, he understood something powerful, that even the smallest gestures of love and care could ripple outward, touching hearts far beyond what he could see. He made a silent promise to continue. He would keep drawing, keep writing little messages, keep spreading kindness wherever he could. He realized that life would still have its struggles, patched clothes, old shoes, scarce food. But those hardships did not define him. What defined him was the love he carried, the heart he gave to others, and the courage to show it, even in a world that often overlooked the smallest voices. As he lay down to sleep, Arif held his bag close, feeling the comfort of the papers and drawings inside. He knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities to share and connect. He had learned that compassion was contagious, that the smallest acts could inspire, and that even a poor boy with a worn bag could change the hearts of many. In the stillness of the night, Arif drifted off to sleep, a quiet smile on his lips. The world outside was vast and uncertain, but inside his small home, love, hope, and kindness had created a circle that could not be broken. The boy who had once worried about a spilled bag now carried something far more precious, the understanding that every heart, no matter how small or poor, could shine and make the world a brighter, better place. After the events of the past days, Arif's life at school had started to change in ways he could not have imagined. The small acts of kindness he had shared, and the way his classmates and teacher had responded, began to ripple outward, creating a sense of community and care that was new to the classroom. Children who once ignored him or whispered behind his back now approached him with respect and curiosity, wanting to learn from his example of generosity. The teacher noticed this change too. She began incorporating small projects into the daily lessons, encouraging students to create notes, drawings, or simple acts of kindness for each other and for people in need. Arif became a quiet leader in these activities. Though he never sought attention, his example inspired others to participate. Classmates who had once been shy or hesitant now felt empowered to make their own contributions, understanding that even the smallest gesture could make a difference. One morning, the teacher asked the class to create something for a local orphanage. Arif's eyes lit up. He carefully prepared his drawings and notes, adding small messages of hope and encouragement. When the class presented their work, the children's efforts were combined into a small collection to be delivered to the orphanage. Arif watched as the excitement spread among his peers, feeling proud not for himself, but for the joy they could bring to others. His quiet influence had sparked a wave of empathy that extended beyond the classroom walls. Back at home, Arif continued his daily routine, helping his mother and spending time with his sister. But now he carried with him a sense of purpose and confidence that had been absent before. His little sister noticed the change too. He seemed happier, more patient, and more willing to share his thoughts and dreams. He began teaching her to draw and write little notes, passing on the lessons of kindness and hope that had become so important in his own life. The community around the school began to notice small changes as well. Parents commented on how children were helping one another, sharing supplies and showing empathy in ways they hadn't before. The ripple effect of Arif's simple actions was growing steadily, showing how even one child's heart could influence many. Teachers and staff felt inspired, seeing that nurturing kindness in young hearts could create lasting change. One day, a visitor from the local community came to the school. They had heard of the students' efforts and wanted to see the results. The children proudly showed their work, their notes, and their drawings. Arif, usually quiet and reserved, stood with his classmates and explained the meaning behind his papers, the simple messages of love and hope. The visitor's eyes filled with tears, touched by the innocence and sincerity of the children's efforts. Arif realized that his small bag, once a source of embarrassment, had become a symbol of compassion and inspiration. Even among his peers, the change was profound. Students who had once felt overlooked or insecure now joined in acts of kindness, encouraged by the atmosphere Arif had helped create. There was laughter, sharing, and an unspoken understanding that caring for others was more important than competition or status. Arif continued to carry his bag, carefully protecting his drawings and notes, but now it felt lighter, filled not only with personal treasures but also with the potential to inspire and uplift. At home, his mother watched the changes with quiet pride. She saw how her son, despite all the hardships they faced, had become a source of light and hope for others. She understood that his resilience and kindness were shaping not just his own life, but the lives of those around him. Arif's sister, too, was learning these lessons. She would draw little pictures and notes alongside him, her laughter echoing in their small home, a testament to the joy that comes from giving. As weeks turned into months, the ripple effect of Arif's actions continued to grow. The classroom became a place where empathy, generosity, and understanding were nurtured daily. Children carried kindness into their homes, families, and the wider community. Arif remained humble, never seeking recognition, but the impact of his quiet courage and big heart was undeniable. At night, when Arif lay down to sleep, he reflected on how far he had come. He thought of the day his bag had fallen, spilling its contents across the classroom floor, and how that single incident had transformed his life. He realized that even the smallest, simplest acts, drawings, notes, gestures of love, could create a lasting impact. His heart felt full, not with pride alone, but with the knowledge that he had helped create a world that was a little kinder, a little brighter, and more connected than before. In this way, Arif's story came full circle. From a poor boy with a worn-out bag to a quiet leader of kindness, he showed everyone around him that true wealth lies not in possessions, but in the generosity of the heart. And though he continued to face hardships, he carried with him the unshakable understanding that one small act of love can ripple endlessly, touching hearts and inspiring hope far beyond what anyone could imagine.